I'll kick us off here. Thanks to everyone for joining. We're still going to have some people rolling in, and that's okay. The good news is that this is recorded, so don't worry about taking expensive notes or anything. I will send the recording to everyone here, and you can share that with your team, rewatch, etc. What we're talking about today, and this is kind of like a fun mashup because Steve and Manan did a webinar together around this same time last year, exactly a year ago. So, I'm kind of thinking back to that, but we're talking about how to use the right tech to get the most out of your day as a recruiter. So it's all about productivity and workflow. I will be moderating today. I'm Christina. I head up growth marketing here at Interstellar. I'm excited to be joined by Manan from Recruiterflow. So Manan, I'm going to let you give a quick intro for yourself and tell us a little bit about you and Recruiterflow.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm about half a world away from most of you right now. I'm currently based in Bangalore. Started Recruiterflow a little over 3 years back. I have a background in engineering and started my first company back in 2013. And was forced to do sales. So I have background in sales as well. At Recruiterflow, we are a simple applicant tracking and a CRM system with just one overarching theme that how do we make sure that our users save more time and do things that are more important to them, right? So spend more time building and nurturing relationships instead of entering data and just managing their ATS, right? So that's what Recruiterflow does. I'm one of the co-founders. We are a small and very quickly growing team. That's basically about me.
Awesome. Steve, you want to talk a little bit about yourself and Interstellar?
Yeah, totally. I'm Steve. I'm the CEO of Interstellar. I started Interstellar back around 2017 or so. So it's been about 4 or more years now of running Interstellar day to day. At Interstellar, like one of our key mantras is like, how do we make recruiting better for all sides, both on the candidate side and also the recruiter side? How do we make that into a better experience? I have a similar kind of like background as Manan, engineer, kind of stumbled on sales. We developed kind of like productivity software towards first initially sales, then eventually towards like the whole recruiting market. I love building productivity software. I think that's like one of the key things of like my background, which is like I love efficiently saving people time. I used to do it at Compass, where we had hundreds of real estate agents, and I helped them basically become super efficient. No need to schedule their appointments or anything. The system just does it automatically for them. But our side too is very similar to Manan's kind of like mantra, which is pretty much like we want to automate a lot of the pieces that don't involve human touches, don't involve like the aspect of a recruiter to do every day, like sending follow-up emails and so forth. And rather, we take all of those pieces and automate those as much as we can, while you, the recruiter, get back to really talking to candidates, interviewing them, doing matchmaking between candidates and jobs. We want you to get back into that forefront manner, right? And let us take care of practically all data entry, email follow-ups, and everything else that can be pretty much automated through tech.
Awesome. Great. And just as we have other people rolling in here, I did forget to mention that we will have a Q&A portion to this. I know people are going to have questions, so feel free to drop those at any point in time that they surface for you in the Q&A box or chat box, and we'll make sure to get to those in the last like 15 to 20 minutes here. So I want to kick off with just kind of laying the landscape here. Let's talk a little bit about not even just recruiting struggles, but kind of like the day-to-day life and what you're hearing right now from conversations with recruiters who are customers and non-customers. Manan, I'm going to throw it over to you to kind of start that off.
Sure. Yeah. So last, of course, if we, we've been through a massive pandemic, which was, which hit the industry, pretty massively, to say the least. But we are really seeing recruiting activity coming back up. So there is a lot on an average recruiter's plate right now, right? So we are constantly seeing our customers have started expanding their teams and trying to set up processes to scale up and things like that. And one of the things that we specifically train our customers on, as far as Recruiterflow is concerned, is that there is so much automation that you can do, right? So almost every recruiting agency right now is competing for maybe top 20-25% of the talent in their niche. Everybody's target is to, hey, how do I stay in front of them? How do I keep them engaged without overloading myself with endless to-do lists and calendar entries, right? So that is one of the things that I hear very, very often, and it is, it's always much better to get the maximum out of your own, your team's productivity before you start expanding your team. So a lot of recruiting leaders are now getting focused on, okay, we have, how do we get more done every day, right? So and that's a very welcome change that I see in the market. And I keep saying this, and a lot of people, a lot of recruiters kind of contest this fact that, the sales as an industry or as a function had an awakening of sales productivity back in 2012, 2013. And traditionally, we've always seen recruiting as an industry lag sales by 5 to 7 years. But what I saw back in 2013, 2014 with sales productivity, I see that happening in recruiting today. So I can say that, there's going to be a lot of focus on recruiter productivity, recruiter output, and can't wait to see where the industry is in a couple of years.
Yeah, super interesting. And I think I'm hearing the same too from my conversations. Steve, I'm curious to hear what you're hearing.
Yeah. I think, there's been a bunch, COVID has definitely shifted things drastically. And, now we're, 1 year from Manan and I's last webinar, we were talking about like how COVID is going to affect us. And today we're talking a little bit about what COVID recovery looks like, right? I think a lot of companies today have shifted towards their hiring techniques from like, cool, we can handle remote. Maybe we're trying to shift towards remote or bringing back people into the office. But one of the key things that we hear all the time is like, how do we make today's recruiter more efficient, right? In an environment where we just don't know or understand because we're in this COVID-shaped recovery. It's very unknown. It's very different from a recession and a recovery from those recessions, like in 08, for example. So these days from like internal teams, I typically hear that like, okay, cool. Like, how do we do more with less? And how do we kind of like do that with products out there, right? Since back then, we've been growing because a lot of these recruiting teams are now like in that mindset of cool. Like, there's definitely opportunity to be really productive through different technologies and connect them all together. On the external side, I think we hear a little bit of like kind of like different struggles. I would say like a lot of the external teams now have like in some markets like the UK market and the Australian market, and actually the Canadian market too. There are too many candidates. Their databases are flooded with candidates, through applications and jobs, and their issues are more towards like, okay, like how do we do business development? And the process actually, if you think about it, candidates and finding like clients are very similar processes. I got to reach out to them. I have to follow up with them, maybe call them here and there. But they're both very similar processes. But now we're in that sense of like, can my tech stack do both? I would say most of the time what I hear from our customers is no, they can't. And so now it's about, okay, cool. How do I adapt to my workflow? How do I need to change that workflow? Do I need to build a new one just for business development? And fortunately enough, at Interstellar, and like Manan said, we started both off as sales, right? And in fact, funny enough, like our products still has that sales engagement part. We never got rid of it, but we focused our product more towards recruiting, so we're able to actually do both. But hey, I'm gonna twist this up a little bit. Like, what do you guys like struggle with? We'll chat about it towards the end of this, but if you want to put it in the little chat box, we'll love to hear from that, because that helps, Manan and I build products that are more geared to you guys. So would love to see you guys type in the panel or the chat panel.
It's chat. Yeah.
One
Go
thing
ahead.
that I missed, and especially now, because now everybody has, including recruiting agencies, have started working remotely. And every company out there is, trying to figure out how they want to operate in a remote first environment. And it's also very interesting, right? Because remote forces you to be more organized, be more communicative. And I see those challenges, for recruiting agencies that are a little bit scaled up. But yeah, and it is a very interesting challenge. And we don't know what's at the end of the road over here, but it's going to be a very interesting transition for recruiting firms to go all remote.
Yeah, and I think that surfaces a really good question too. In my mind too, as we're kind of going through this, is, I think a lot of people, when we were having this conversation last year at this time, people were trying to figure out what tech could enable them to work remotely distributed and still be super productive. Do you think that now, as some people are coming up with plans to re-enter kind of, whether it's a hybrid working environment or returning to work fully, et cetera, whatever that might look like, do you think that people are starting to reevaluate tech again as part of that cycle? And twofold question, do you think that some of the solutions people might have selected a year ago might not work for coming back into the office? I'm just curious what your thoughts are around that. Whoever wants to go first.
Yeah. Yeah. Tech, right? Tech is fun. Tech is hard. I think as companies become, tech firms become a little bit more remote, right? They're now no longer working side by side from each other, right? So tech needs to become more of like the facilitator more than it is like the enabler, right? So I think it's just more of like a thought transition, right? Because I'm no longer working with Christina, who is shoulder to shoulder with me to communicate or maybe disseminate knowledge, right? And so now it's becoming more and more important to have tech facilitate recruiting for some recruiters, and also enable them at the same time, right? So a key example is, right, like you typically would have like a task list, right? I know Christina and Manan still use like paper and pencil, but with Interstellar, right, like we kind of like help you like, hey, these are the things that you're missing out on. These are the tasks that you need to complete, right? So we're actually helping you not forget some of these items, so that way you will become just like, you're not spending an hour or two figuring out what you need to do. It's just all available for you. It's all available for you in one flow. Yeah, did I answer the question?
That's I think Manan can add on to it too.
No, absolutely. So I mean, we don't, we are not 100% sure what the, once we are out of the pandemic, what the work model is going to look like. But my guess is that it's very, I mean, the whole pendulum has shifted towards in favor of, more remote firms. At Recruiterflow, we have gone completely remote, and we intend to stay this way because it's just, in our opinion, so much better. Um, and I'm sure that a lot of companies are coming to the same conclusion. And it's not something new, right? We have had some great tech companies like Zapier, GitLab, who've been remote from the word go, right? So and they the thing is the transition is in terms of building processes and communication. Um, and as Stephen said, right, like creating your task list is a very important part of, for you to organize your day and also to train other team members in terms of, how they should organize their day to get the most out of it. And Tech is, I think, going to play a very key role in this transition. And we are already seeing a lot of new startups popping up in the space, right? Not just for recruiting, but all across the board. And yeah, so I believe that even if you go back in a hybrid model or co-located model, there is the gains in terms what you've made in terms of processes and creating that culture and practice of communication is not going to go away, and is just going to make even co-located working even better. And to answer your second question, um, I think yes, that some of the choices that you might have made, a couple of years back, working where everybody's working together, where actually collaborating is not really that difficult to do. That whole assumption falls apart, right? So when people are working not together, maybe not even at the same time, a different kind of workflow needs to come in. So maybe most of the choices that you made in terms of your tech stack is correct, but some of it you might just have to reevaluate.
Makes sense. Yeah. And I mean, listen, both of our solutions are in the recruiting enablement space, right? Like we both have goals high level to make recruiters more productive. So I think getting down to kind of the nitty gritty here, we've talked about automation and how you can kind of enable recruiters to be more productive, but what is that right blend of tech in your opinion? And what does an optimized, people are talking about optimized tech stack really look like? What are some traits there? So Steve, do you want to kick off with that one?
Yeah, sure. What is the right blend of tech is kind of like a very similar question to what is the right blend of processes, right? Because like tech at the end of the day, like helps you with processes. It isn't like I think like sometimes, we get like all this news about like, cool, this is the magic bullet to recruiting, or like these are like headlines that basically say like this thing can do and automate your job in seconds, right? Unfortunately, I don't know about you guys, but I live in kind of like the real world, and I like both Manan and I know AI really well, and I'll tell you, AI doesn't really exist. It's more just like, hey, here's an if statement that tells you what to do, right? I think it's really just depends on your processes, right? Are there pains currently in your process, right? Is it like cool, like the data quality that I have is really terrible, right? And so tech can help you solve that problem, right? Am I spending too much time in like a certain area, or am I losing candidates because I'm not, like, it's been 3 weeks since we followed up with this person, right? Tech can help you kind of like surface these items and help you organize that process a bit better. I tend to say, like, especially in our organization at Interstellar, I always tell this to everyone, including Christina. It's like, what do we need to solve today? Because if you try to solve like, oh wait, like there are like the 10 things we could do when we're like 100-person organization, right? Like, yes, I love to dream. I love to be like, right, we're gonna make millions and millions of dollars, right? But unfortunately, right, you don't want processes to boggle you down, and you also want processes to increase like your productivity and keep things organized. So I think to me, the right blend of tech is pretty much the right like set of processes, right? You don't, yeah, like at the same, like same can be said. They're like one in one. Like you don't want your tech to be hindering your team from being productive, and you also don't want tech to like not exist when there are problems that you need to solve. So I usually like do hand to hand. It's like saying like everyone needs email. I think there are the basics, right? And then the next pieces are like, hey, if you've only been doing, let's say like you are sending out like an offer letter. Let's give that as an example, and you're doing that like once a month, right? Or like maybe, and it takes you an hour once a month. Maybe that isn't like the right time to add tech. But let's say if you've missed out on like 5 candidates that you could have placed somewhere because like you just forgot about them because like something else was like really in the like at hand at that time, right? It's important to continue following up on those 5, and that like adds revenue, right? And so that's when I would start adding tech to help you remind you on things like, cool, let's make sure we're always following up with candidates. That's usually my ideal tech stack, which is like, can it solve a process? Can it bring accountability in my processes? Those are like the 2 key things that I look into tech to help me solve.
Yeah, no, that's actually the right way of going about it, right? So we even when we were scaling sales orgs, that's we went from a 2 people, just 2 co-founders sales team, to a sales team of about 15 people, and we kind of take problems a quarter by quarter basis, that hey, this quarter this is what needs to be solved, and this is how we are going to build our processes, and my you need to have like your North Star. You need to be focused on that North Star, right? So your North Star is making those placements, right? So and when you build your process, almost everything that your team every step that your team has to go through, you need all of those steps correlate. First, you need to make sure that all of those steps directly correlate to your North Star, which is bringing that revenue in. And generally speaking, the 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 steps that have very high correlationship with your final revenue, but can't really easily be automated. You want to do that yourself. You want to keep that high value stuff, because essentially recruiting is always going to be a human to human business, right? So no point replacing that. But all the low value tasks, which don't really have very high correlationship with your final North Star metric, you should start thinking about, how do I minimize, either completely automate this, or how do I minimize the amount of time spent doing this, right? So that's the right way. So one of the mistakes that a lot of people make is they start thinking from tech instead of start thinking from process, right? So you have to start thinking at the bottom end. This is what my process looks like. This is what I need to optimize, and what's the tech that can optimize this for me, right? So So if you start looking at tech, you are kind of fitting, a square peg in a round hole kind of a situation, and not always the best way of going about it.
I tend to find like my general rule of thumb pretty much is the thing that I'm doing today, am I doing that tomorrow? Am I doing that the next day and the next day after that? How manual is it? Can I solve that problem through tech, right? It's like Manan brought up like a really good point, which is like think about your processes first, then your tech, not your tech first, then your processes, because I will tell you, there is a lot of tech out there, right? Like in the pandemic alone, right? Let me tell you about all the different tech experiences that are now remote enabled tools, right? Like there's apparently a new Zoom app that like you can start taking notes and like email people as you go. There's like 5 different skins of Salesforce that you could buy and purchase to enable you to update Salesforce faster, right? There's a lot of tech, and tech is supposed to help you optimize your processes, not like be that magic bullet. So yeah, Manan brought it really well. Think of your processes first, then your tech, not the other way around.
Yeah, I'm noticing a common thread between both of your answers, and I'm like shaking my head and also like tapping my foot because, it. I think what it sounds like to me that both of you are saying is map out your processes. Like if you don't have those mapped out already, where like, hey, from start to finish, here's what we do from the time we have an opening to the time that we fill it, whatever that process is. Figure out where the bottlenecks are, and then find the solutions that can maybe solve for some of those bottlenecks. I won't even talk about when we used to do manual tasks without a task list in Interstellar. But anyway, that's a side note. Cool. So I think you both kind of went into this a little bit, but would love to know, it's like you said, it's very noisy. There's a lot of tech out there. It can sometimes be overwhelming. I think there's a couple of mistakes people probably make. And we've all been there, where they either pick solutions that don't ultimately talk, or they overlap, or whatever the case may be. But what do you think can and should be automated in the recruitment process?
Great question.
I know it's a big question.
Yeah, no. So, Stephen, you want to take a shot at it, or should I go first?
Sure. Yeah, I'm highly opinionated on this. So, in the recruiting process, there are things that I think humans do extremely really well. I'm a very outspoken person. I love hanging out with people. I love talking to people. It's like one of my key things that I do with everyone in my company. I actually, in fact, talk to 12 of my employees every single week for 30 minutes every single week, every week. And I try not to miss it because it just helps me understand everyone's mindset. I think recruiting should be in a very similar manner, right? I don't think, for example, things that should be automated, like sending out emails, right? Follow-up emails, data entry, research, right? These are items that I think that computers and AI do really well, because there is no like human factor into that, right? Inherently, email is electronic, and so therefore like computers can electronically send emails really well. There are some items, for example, that I believe that recruiters should always be doing, and that AI or tech should not be doing. For example, matchmaking. I will tell you, time over time, in Interstellar, we had a pilot program where we tried to match candidates to like jobs, and I will tell you, recruiters do this far better than what any AI or tech-enabled thing that we could have done. So matchmaking, super important. Recruiters should always be doing that yourself. Second thing that I always believe in is interviews, right? There's like, I think like one of the key things that recruiters forget is that interviews are human driven, right? I also think that some companies, and like, trust me, as a founder, I used to encounter this problem a lot, which is people try to think of the recruiting process as like, I need to filter out as many people as I can. And in fact, I think that's like the opposite way of thinking. The way we think at Interstellar for like as the first interview in any process is, how can I convince you that Interstellar is the job for you? I think the problem is when people think of the interview process, they're like, okay, cool, I need to like find the best person. Whereas what you should be doing in your first call is like, how can I convince this person that like Interstellar is the right job for them? And that's human driven, right? And so we have a lot of technology now that I don't believe in, which is like, hey, I'm going to send this engineer this like 3-hour code test, and if they don't pass it, I'm not going to even talk to them. And what tends to happen is you get a huge drop off because that engineer is like, I don't have the time to do this, and I don't know what this job is even for. I've encountered that many times. I think scheduling is also another one where like automation really, really helps. I've experienced this a lot, which is like trying to organize like 4 or 5 people's calendars, and I've made mistakes. Let's just say computers can do that way better than I can. I also do believe, here's another thing that is very controversial amongst Interstellar, because we go back and forth on this all the time, which is like candidates replying back, right? You get a lot of them. Maybe you get like hundreds of candidates responding back to you. People have asked us a lot, which is like, can I just add an autoresponder to these guys? Unfortunately, time over time, computers have a really hard time understanding kind of like the content of an email. In fact, there might be like, I can think of like one product already out there, which is called Clara, which is, I think, bought by Top Funnel. But Clara, for example, can respond back to you. But just to be purely honest, about 40 to 60% of those responses are actually just people replying back to your emails and not AI. It's literally just a person behind just typing an email. If it isn't instant, if it isn't within 3 seconds, it's not AI. Sorry to say that, but I will tell you that time over time, I highly recommend sending a nice and crafted email, even in a rejection, because you can take a rejection 1 year later and turn that around, right? So it's still a recruiter's job to be kind of like the frontline brand for that company when you are recruiting for that company, because you are the first person that they talk to. So I think of recruiting as not only filling a seat, but also like kind of like promoting a brand, right? Because you have your company's brand and you also have your employer brand. That's another topic for debate. So I always, anytime you can like convince a candidate strongly about like, hey, like, I'm not interested, but maybe respond back to me in like 6 months. Take that moment to respond back to them. Give them a thoughtful, craftful response, and they will always remember that, right? No one remembers the AI responses that say like, oh, thanks for letting me know. No one remembers that. So if you are able to draft that thoughtful response, A+. Anyway, sorry, I'm talking too much.
No, I completely agree with Stephen. In fact, right around the time when we were launching Recruiterflow, I wrote an article. This is about 3 years back, so my memory might not serve me right, but I think it was on socialtalent.com on the false promise of AI, right? So yeah, as Adam has said in the chat, right? Like, better than any if-else statement, right? So going back to the point that Stephen made, that hey, can we match candidates to job requirements? Let's if you're not in tech, it's difficult to understand, hey, why not? Like the keywords are there, everything is there, like what's so hard, right? I mean, I'm going to put it in a different way, right? So right now, even the best of the best firms, like we are talking about companies like Tesla, Google, Apple, are struggling to build an algorithm that drives a car on a on a road in a city like, let's say, Chicago, right? So you look at the cognitive complexity of that process versus the cognitive complexity of looking at a person's, let's say, just their LinkedIn profile, understanding what a job is, what a particular company is, what their culture looks like, what do their goals look like, and making that match. I mean, we are talking about things that are so far apart from each other, and we are just getting started, right? I'm not saying, I'm maybe 30 years later I can be wrong, but right now we are nowhere even close. And another very quick heuristic is that if you look at AI as a kid growing up, right now the cognitive capability of AI is maybe a 6 month, 7 month old infant. So but of course there is a lot of false promises out there, and I live in Bangalore, right? So I know a lot of companies that promise AI but have people here just doing stuff manually. So yeah, I mean, one of the things that I tell my team, especially our sales team, all the time, that if there is anything in your work that that you can explain to a 10-year-old or 12-year-old, explain to them in a couple of hours and get them to do it, there's a very good chance that there is tech who would be able to at least partly automate some bits of it, and you can reduce the amount of time that you're spending on that. But yeah, I mean, there is no replacement of building relationships, and that we have to look at the tech as an enabler, right? Like, hey, tech is like, think of something as simple as a scheduling tool like Calendly, right? Before Calendly, it was difficult to schedule calls between each other. Now it's just, hey, this is the link, pick a slot that works for you, as simple as that. No AI, very straightforward, right? So that's so you have to look at technology from that perspective, that, hey, is it going to help me simplify certain processes, and yeah, get on with my day.
I love that. I'm just like having flashbacks from when I was in recruiting, and I had tech that would help me, go through, let's just say 100 resumes and like tell me who they suggest to be the right person. And I would never use it. I wanted to go through all of them because I was a firm believer that you could find sometimes these, what I would call diamonds in the rough, that probably wouldn't get through some sort of set of filters, but they have potential for a role. So just thinking, like, just because you can use tech for something doesn't necessarily mean it's going to fit the process and the brand that you want to put forward. So I love what both of you said.
Yeah, sometimes I'm sorry to interrupt
You're
you.
fine.
Sometimes it just becomes counterproductive, right? So you put in tech where it's not necessary. It just increases steps, it increases complexity, and becomes counterproductive, right? So like things like those auto suggestions on Gmail and LinkedIn chat, I find them quite idiotic, but there we are. And it's very evident for everybody to see that, hey, this is what this person just did. Like, he didn't even bother to type an email, just clicked it and sent it. So and as technology evolves, people's expectation around it also evolves, right? So and when you are in a relationship business, you want to keep that at the forefront of everything that you do.
Awesome. Yeah, I have another question here I want to get to. Just for everyone listening, as a reminder, we're going to get to the Q&A portion in roughly 5 minutes. So definitely, if you have questions, drop those in the boxes, either chat or Q&A. We will get to them. We've already got some good questions. Listen, even though you both have tech companies, We also evaluate tech ourselves. So I think what would be really interesting, because I know people are in this audience are either currently looking at solutions or, are always like keeping an ear to the ground for new solutions. If someone is looking at new tech solutions, what kind of questions should they be asking? Where should they start? Just thinking about that process.
Yeah, I think if you're starting to look at tech, I think the key thing is that you should always somewhat trust the person in front of you. I know they're salespeople, but we try to design it in such a way where like, cool, like these are the processes. I teach my team quite often. These are the processes that we're looking for that we can help solve, and identify those processes, right? I think before you even start looking at tech, it's just like, write down the steps that you are trying, like the steps of your processes down. I think we mentioned it before. Just write those down and see where you can improve. Sometimes I will tell you that there's gonna be like a $5 tool per month out there that can help you actually solve like those bits for you, rather than like like the Maserati of like recruiting products that may be a little bit too much at that time, right? And it's okay, right? And it's okay to buy the most simplistic thing first, then work your way up there, right? Because if you don't like, if you're like comparing a feature list and you're like, oh, these like 20 different things, they would be nice to have. That's exactly what it is. It's nice to have, but you're never ever gonna utilize it just yet, right? And even though we may think that like, oh, in a month's time or 2 months time, it's probably 2 or 3x longer than you think it is. So I tend to always be like, okay, well, in 6 months we'll probably get to that stage, but we'll take a look at it then, right? Evaluate the parts of tech that you need to evaluate today rather than 6 months down the road, because it's these days like switching between tech is like a lot easier than it was before, since governments now are like, you can't do certain practices anymore, which is good. But yeah, come to the table with A, what are you trying to solve? B, what are the specific like features, because you're going to do your own research and due diligence. So what are the features that you think could solve those things primarily? Everything else is fluff. So try to ignore the fluff, focus on the areas that you're trying to like really hone in on. We've learned that time over time here at Interstellar, not only in like recruiting tech, but sales tech, marketing tech, you name it. We've done a lot of due diligence, and sometimes like the salesperson comes to us and says like, here's the gold plaque, and we're like, what does this gold plaque do? I'm not really sure what this gold plaque does, but okay, cool. Like, I guess we're sold. Try not to be oversold by a salesperson. Ask and focus on the things on your list.
Yeah, and yeah, again, right? Like it goes back that first you figure out your process and go to tech from there. Otherwise, the options will kind of overwhelm you and push you towards a suboptimal decision. Like, for example, for a company at our size, when we are looking at marketing automation, something like Pardot or Barketo is maybe an overkill, but maybe HubSpot or Autopilot, some of these great marketing automation tools out there are a great fit for us. They are not going to be a great fit for us maybe a year or two down the road, but we'll cross that bridge once we get there, kind of a situation. And you want to, there is a tendency of, and I see this quite often, that, hey, is that there is one, golden software out there that does everything for me? The difficult question is no, right? And the main reason is that, okay, so let's, it might seem like, hey, let's just look at Calendly and how difficult it is for Recruiterflow to build something like Calendly. The point is that building something like Calendly, although it looks very simple, when you get in the details of it, it's an extremely difficult problem to solve. It's not an easy one to solve. And when a product team starts focusing on solving way too many problems, they don't solve any problem really, really well. So what you want to do is that, hey, these are the problems that I want to solve, and who solves them best for me, and make sure that so you will end up with maybe a few different software as part of your technology stack. You want to make sure that they talk well with each other, right? So they have open APIs, and if you ever have a need in the future, they integrate with Zapier, have open APIs, so you have that flexibility to scale with that, right? So that's basically what you're looking for.
That was huge. And I see Steve like, yes. The last thing you want is something that's piecemealed and siloed, where you can't get things to talk, or you have to pay an enormous fee to get something to talk. But anyway, awesome. I want to get to the Q&A because we do have some good questions here, and we're running up on the time that I think it'll take to answer them. If you have additional questions, drop them in. If for some reason we don't get to them, I'll make sure that we follow up with an answer. So let me start with this one. I'm just moving into the recruiting space and am targeting a very specific candidate profile. What is the connection or integration between Recruiterflow and Interstellar? This person, by the way, has had a demo with Recruiterflow already, but wants to just understand the integration more. So okay. Relevant question, I think.
Yeah, Steven, maybe you want to take a shot at it?
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like this is very more like Interstellar directed, right? Like, I'm gonna go through quick 30-second pitch of Interstellar, which is like, we help with the sourcing process of recruiting, right? You need to get in touch with a candidate. You don't know their contact information. We help you find that contact information. The next step is like, how do I reach out to that person, right? We have built in best in class, basically email automation and tasks similar to like what salespeople do. We help you do that outreach. And so our connection with Recruiterflow, what we do and how it like really speeds up that, recruiting process is all of that data that I just mentioned, emails that you sent, data that we found, the LinkedIn profile that you found also that you're trying to like go and gear towards, just gets all synced over into Recruiterflow, right? That way, no more just copying and pasting or data entry. You got to do none of that. And the other aspect too is you get a lot of different pieces of data that Interstellar gives to Recruiterflow, like when they last responded, if they unsubscribed, if they're interested. We sync all of that data over so you can run those searches really, really well inside of Recruiterflow. Oh, and no, just basically every detail in Recruiterflow too. So, yeah, that's usually our integrations. And one thing to know, I would tell that's Manan's last question, which was like, make sure they play well together, because I won't name names, but there are definitely like Manan's API is super open. We're very, very open to integrating with anyone that allows us to. There's still a lot of old school tech out there that still won't play nice. I don't know why. Like, it doesn't really make sense in this day and age. But I would say one key question to ask your sales guy: hey, like, if I were to build an integration with you guys tomorrow, do you have an API? And two, can I do it tomorrow? If the question is no, you have to pay a fee, I would recommend trying to find a different vendor, because they will play very hardball in terms of like trying to get anything integrated at all.
Good points. Yeah, love that. All right. How many touches is appropriate for recruitment? I think this could vary, but anyone want to give a stab at that?
Very, very different kinds of opinions out there. My opinion and experience, 3 or 4. in a quick succession, right? So what I'm saying that deliver 4 touch points over 2 weeks. But again, recruiting, especially if you're doing executive searches, maybe a long-term game. So once if you're done with those 4 touch points, it doesn't mean that, and the person doesn't respond, doesn't mean that, you should end over there. Have a process in place where, you are, for those top candidates in your market, you're reaching out to them, a few months later, just staying in front of them. That's key to be successful in the market. But yeah, if we are talking in the limited context of in quick succession of each other, I think 3 to 4 is not crossing that line of annoying somebody. And this is strictly in recruiting. Sales, again, right? Like you can do way more touch points, but recruiting, I think, marginal utility after 4th touch point, I've seen that decrease quite drastically. But I don't know. What do you think, Steve?
What was the golden rule of marketing? I think it was like, I think I learned this a while back from Google, which is like,
I should know this.
They recommend like 13 different touch points. And I'm like, oh God. And to define what a touch point is in marketing, it's like, cool, I saw your ad in a subway car, right? Like those are like touch points. But when we're coming to like recruiting, I think like one of the key things is like, you don't want to, you want to be persistent, but you don't want to sound annoying. Right? I think so. It's a blend between what your strategy is and like how you're reaching out to that person, and what that person actually reads. We tend to find sometimes that in some spaces, email is perfect, right? Like engineering, tech, everyone has an email address, so it's very good. It's very more like very relaxed kind of touch points. 4 to 5 is pretty good, I would say. Anything beyond that is your strategy takes too long, because for example, if you have one email that like you try to split out your emails in kind of like the topics you want to talk about in each one, right? Because you want to make it sound slightly different. You want your pitch to be slightly different in each, but all lead to like kind of like the same like point. If you were to do it in 10 different emails and try to like that, you're just like thought splitting a little bit too much, and it takes way too long to understand what your pitch is, because it's a series of 10 emails, right? So I tend to find that you should try to like sum it up in 4, send it across 2 weeks or so, like Manan mentioned. I also tend to say that like don't repeat yourself like too much. You do want to repeat yourself a little bit, but again, you don't want like email 1 to be like, hey, do you want this job? And then like the second email being like, hey, I emailed you about a job. Do you want it? You don't want to sound like that, right? You want to add more detail every single email that you send. Otherwise, like my rule of thumb to my sales guys are like, if it's not necessary, don't send it. If you're sending an email that says like, hey, didn't hear back from you, like, did you get my last email? You didn't really add anything to the conversation. You're just kind of like, oh, hey, did you get it? You want to add more to every single email that you send. Otherwise, it's just like kind of like just dead weight in my inbox. That's kind of how I like to say it. But yeah, 4 touch points.
I'm with everyone here too. So, I mean, on the sales development side, it's a little bit different. We have, 7 touch points, but they're across multiple channels. The emails are only 3 to 4 emails, right? So if you're spacing things out, I think it's like a 14-day span too. So yeah, definitely love that. All right, here's the next one. Recruiting is an extremely crowded landscape. Definitely. How do you feel, this is another tool specific question, how do you feel your tools enable firms to stand out from the crowd? And the second part of that question is, how do you enable deep personalization and better intelligence in this space?
Wow, that's a brilliant question.
That's a heavy question too. So
yeah, very heavy. And kind of the golden goose of the sales tech space, enabling deep personalization. Yeah, there is no. I mean, technology is not the answer. I mean, of course, right? So, for example, what the different tools help you organize deep personalization, make it easier, more seamless, but you have to, kind of follow your own process on how do you personalize your touch points. There are a lot of different frameworks out there. Our sales team follows this framework called the Basho framework of personalization. And you can, just a quick Google search will tell you. But the essence of these personalizations is that you want to have, the idea behind personalization is that that's the hook for somebody to read the rest of your email a little bit more seriously, right? Otherwise, your email, if it's more than 2 or 3 lines long, people are just skimming through it, reading the top, then reading the bottom, and then getting to the main body, right? So if your personalization, so for something like Recruiterflow, we help you, really uh, organize this data and help you train your recruiters and your team in terms of how to do this personalization, right? So let's just take a very simple example, and we'll take this example on the business development side, right? So let's say you see that that a VP of marketing in your area is hiring a digital marketer. How would you go about pitching this person, your business? So you can, the lowest hanging fruit over here is that you can say that, hey, I saw that you are recruiting, you're looking for a digital marketer, and we work with companies that are quite similar to them, right? So if you pitch a company like, let's say, Interstellar or us, that, hey, we hire marketers for companies like Facebook, we have absolutely nothing in common with company like Facebook, right? So it's better if you tell us a startup that around our size, in our kind of a space, and so those are the kind of things that Recruiterflow can really help you organize, and that data can then flow back to something like Interstellar, or you can have it right inside Recruiterflow to reach out to your prospects, right? So that's one thing that Recruiterflow can do, and better intelligence in the space. Okay, so intelligence is it's a kind of a lagging indicator, right? So once things have happened, you can go back, look at your data, and see why certain things panned out the way that they did, whether it was whether you succeeded or failed with your targets. And that is why it's extremely important for you to have very structured data in your CRM, ATS, whatever you want to call them, so that you can go back and query your database. You can do this at, hey, for all the prospects that we reached out to as part of a particular campaign, and we mentioned their open positions, what was the response rate versus when we didn't mention their open positions, right? So, or when we mentioned companies similar to them in that space, when we didn't, right? So, once you have the data structured, you can go through that data and build, it's again, iterative process, keep getting better and better and better at it.
Yeah, awesome. I feel bad because we're like a minute over now. So I don't think, Steve, do you want to take a stab before we end, or maybe we follow up in our follow-up email?
I'll just do one word.
One
Space
word.
Bear.
Space Bear.
How do we differentiate ourselves? Space Bear. I'll just do like 10 seconds, which is like, I think one of the key things that really, really maybe helps us, maybe shoots us in the foot, is like you could go to our website today, figure out exactly what you need, what Interstellar does. I don't think a lot of products out there do that today. I think, we still live in a really weird era of like, people know how to buy software these days, right? They know how to buy. And where we as companies aren't matching how people buy software, it's like there's still the obscurity of like, wait, what ballpark range is this product in, right? Um, yeah, I would very much say like we just try to be just like a different type of sales org. We're trying to also be, very, very supportive, not only in tech but also through strategy help too. So a lot of things on that era. We've kind of built a name around the Space Bear, so also.
Yeah, I love the Space Bear.
We're both wearing Space Bear. Anyway, well, thank you so much. I hate to cut us off. We didn't get to answer everything. We'll try to follow up after the webinar and just make sure everyone feels good about those answers. But thank you so much, Manan, too, and Steve, for spending time educating and talking to us about this topic. And thank you to the audience for being here and sticking it out. So everyone enjoy the rest of your day and week and evening in the case of Manan and some of our other people. So cheers, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.